Now you can see here, looking at the front of the unit with the insert in place, and the router bit is coming down from the top, and that's pretty close to being correct. I won't know until I try it actually, but that's about how far down you want the router bit to extend into the insert to start setting up the exact depth for threading. All right, we've got it all set up now, and we're going to test it to make sure that our thread is correct. And I've got a piece of dowel here, and I've also got my little crank, and there's a drawing for how to make this crank that comes with the set in the instructions. So it's a handy thing to have. You put your dowel in here and tighten it up, and then I'm going to turn on this router, and it's going to be very noisy. Well, there, I've threaded a couple of inches, and we've got a really nice thread. And the next thing we're going to do is to check that thread a couple of different ways. Although this is perfectly fine, I can tell by looking at it. I'm going to tell you what you need to do in case it doesn't look quite this good. Now you can see that this thread has a good bit of flat on the top of the crest of the thread. You see along in here? In other words, it's not sharp. You don't want it sharp for a wooden thread, because if it's very sharp, then the threads will start to chip off between the thread. So they want to have a nice flat, as much flat as you can get on top, like that, just like this one is. Now, one way to make sure that the thread is correct is to measure along here to see that you're actually getting the right pitch. And the pitch that you want is on the 3/4 and also on the 1 inch is 6 threads per inch. And if you count between the 1 and the 2 there on my scale, you'll see there 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and it comes out right exactly with the inch marks at the top of the thread. And that's the way it should be. If your threads jam a little bit when you start to do threading, when you put it in here like this, and it'll turn a little way and then stop and get really tight, it probably means that the router bit is not properly centered. It's very important that the router bit's centered. If the router is a little bit too far forward or a little bit too far back, it will change the pitch of the thread, and it won't be right and it won't work properly. The other thing that's important is to make sure that the depth is set right. Now this one is just fine, but if it was a little too sharp on the crest and started to chip out, that would mean that the router is down too far. And you want to loosen your router up in its housing here and raise it up just a bit. And sometimes only a few thousandths makes the difference between a good thread and a bad thread. If, on the other hand, it won't go through and the crest on the top is very fat, then you need to lower the router to make it a little bit deeper. Unfortunately, there's no easy tried and true way to tell when the router is set at the right depth. What you really have to do is just try it. And you may burn up a dowel in the process of getting it right. Once, however, you've done it and got it right, the next time it'll be easier, and as you go on with your threader from, as I have for years and years, you can pretty much look at it and your eyeball will tell you when the depth is correct. The next thing we're going to do is to demonstrate the tap and how to make threaded holes and nuts. And you can see that I have here a piece of stock that I've laid out some hex nuts in, and also I've drilled a couple of them to start with. In order to lay out this hexagonal nut shape, I've used this template, which is something that we sell as well. It's the Beal Tool Company hex nut template, and they're very handy because you can do many, many different sizes of hex nuts using this template to lay them out. It has a center for the center hole to mark through, and also for the OD of the various hex nut sizes. Now I'm going to drill a few of these. Which is not a very big deal. I think drill press is pretty self-explanatory. But this is the way to make a series of nuts, by ripping a piece of stock the right width and then boring holes. In order to make a nice, smooth chamfered entry hole for your threads, we have a countersink, a special countersink that we've been carrying for some time. This will do anything up to 1 inch and down to 0. It's also handy for countersinking holes for wood screws and about anything else. It has a 3/8 shaft, so it'll fit in a cordless drill as well. And it's an 82-degree angle here, which is the proper size for wood screws. So I'm going to go ahead and countersink these holes a little bit. Doesn't need much, just so you get a nice smooth beveled edge on both sides before you tap. This is the tap, one of the taps that comes with the threader kit, and it's a special tap that we have made that has a removable pilot here on the end. This will come off by taking this screw loose, and the purpose of that is so that you can tap closer to the bottom of a hole. For a wood tap, particularly one as coarse as this is, which is 6 threads per inch, you have to start it in a hole so that it's very nice and tight, like this, and you see it just barely fits down in there. So when you put your tap wrench on and start to turn it, it will seat down into the hole. But the pilot keeps the tap vertical so that it starts even and doesn't go crooked as it goes into the hole. And so, very easily tap that hole. And if I were doing all of these nuts at the same time, I would tap them all. Once the tap is gone through, you can feel it doesn't turn very hard, and you can back it up. This tap wrench, by the way, is another accessory that we sell. It's very handy for doing your tapping. It's a very nice wrench, big, heavy thing. You have plenty of leverage with it, and it works very well for this purpose. Now, you can see I've tapped this hole, and if I turn it sideways, you can see the thread in there, and you can see that it's got a little bit of roughness around the top. I could have probably countersunk it a little deeper, and that would have eliminated that, but that's what we want. Now, when we take our threaded dowel, we can turn it right into that hole, and it fits very nicely, as you can see. And the next thing we can do is to cut it out and make a hex nut out of it. Now, making these hex nuts is a little tricky. The way I do it, or have done it for years before I made the special fixtures for that purpose, was to cut this line out on a bandsaw as close as I could get it, and then sanded it right to the line with my belt sander. That's a good way to do it.